Diamond, Diamond.
A precious gem of the most valuable kind. When pure, it is clear.
Diamond, Diamond.
A family name bringing traditions of love, hard work, and moral values.
This is the Diamond Education Podcast with my mom and dad, Johnny and Kelly England.
Welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast with John and Kelly England, your hosts. We're here to help you find the most valuable education for your child.
We are excited today to have our friend Heather Paul on the program with us. Heather Paul is a director and a science teacher at Ascend, a mentored education. Heather and her husband Val, along with 3 other couples, founded Ascend 11 years ago to provide an outstanding education for their own children. She was recognized as the outstanding graduate from the College of Education while getting her degree in elementary education from Utah State University. Heather has taught in a variety of settings, but her most treasured teaching experience was homeschooling her 5 daughters. She is passionate about providing a wholesome and protected environment for youth to grow into who they are meant to be. Heather loves to travel the United States and abroad, especially on humanitarian trips. E-biking is her newest hobby. She supports her kids in the performing arts, leads youth choirs, and designs and sews costumes for youth plays. Heather, welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. What a treat to be here with my friends.
Yes, we are so excited to have you. And for our audience who has been listening to us for a while, we have 2 of our children who are attending Ascend. And so we are definitely excited to have you on and be able to kind of highlight Ascend and you and the work that you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you. And their kids are fabulous, just so you know. They're wonderful to have part of our school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So we like to start out our podcast, Heather, with the question, what is education?
Oh my goodness. Isn't that a fantastic question? I absolutely love that question because education sometimes is defined so narrowly, but the way that I look at education is very broad. It's a lifetime process that helps us be able to gain mastery over our heart, over our mind, over our bodies, and discipline to be able to gain the skills to truly become instruments to have a positive impact in this world. Sometimes academics are what we think of when we think of education, but I think it's much more about training the heart and developing the heart and nurturing the heart. Learning how to think is a big part of education, and learning that process of asking yourself questions and finding answers and knowing when you land on an answer that resonates truth, not just as logically makes sense, but that you can feel is right, and knowing where to go to get right answers. All of that encompasses education for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love what you said about truth there. When we were very first talking about a podcast, one of the ideas that we threw out for the name of it is the pursuit of truth. And looking at that, because I do think that's something that's important in our children's lives, is for them to know how to find truth for themselves and be able to grow. And as was in your bio, grow into who they are meant to be. So yeah, that's way awesome. So Ascend has an interesting history with how it began. So I'd love if you would talk about how you and your husband and the other founding families decided to begin the school, and what were some of the reasons that you began Ascend?
Fantastic question. As John read in my bio, I have my education in elementary education. My degree is in elementary education. And I left the college. It was a fantastic school. Utah State is renowned for their education program, with more questions than answers, which led me to a couple summers of my own research. And naturally, it kind of took me to alternative routes of education and into the homeschooling world. And so I had determined before I ever had children at that point that I was going to give that a try. And then my oldest daughter was born with Down syndrome. And it totally threw me. And so we started to navigate the path of all kinds of surgeries and therapies and everything like that. But then ended up, when it was time to send her to school, coming back to that same leanings. And we started to homeschool her at that point when she was 5 or 6. And then the others just all followed suit. But then we realized that when we reached, so I have 5 daughters altogether, we realized that when they reached 13, 12, 13, that I was sitting there watching them one day and realized that they would walk to the moon and back for me up to that point. And they had just incredible friendships, full family relationships, just beautiful world we had created for them with lots of different people. But I realized that they would do more for someone else than for me. And I felt like it wasn't fair for them to stay with me solely. And so that's when we started on the journey with the 3 other couples, because they were in the same boat. They were in that preteen stage, realizing that outside mentors definitely have a role. And so we went about trying to create the most perfect environment for our children that we could, and trying to hire mentors we completely trusted and that would hold our kids accountable, that they would give challenging assignments and the kids would buckle down and do it with me as a coach instead of the primary, giver of assignment. And that has been a beautiful process, because I've never totally given my parenting rights over to the school by any means, or to these other mentors. They've definitely been an extension of our home, but they've inspired and pulled out of my kids more than I could ever myself. And that was the whole intent of Ascend 11 years ago. We really didn't think a lot of people would be interested in attending outside of the homeschooling circles. And yet we found through the years that we are appealing to a lot of people now that are wanting a different environment. And we're having these fabulous families and kids find us. And it is creating a beautiful environment to develop, to grow, to progress, and to ultimately figure out what their life's missions are and prepare for that life mission.
I love that.
Awesome.
I love that. As you know, Heather, we're new to the homeschool world. I mean, this is our 2nd year.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 that go to Ascend, and then our high schooler does kind of multiple things. But your Ascend was like a blessing, such a huge blessing to find, because I was overwhelmed that first year, because I was like, the public education was no longer fitting us. And I was like, 5 kids, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
It's terrifying.
Yeah,
It's absolutely terrifying.
And you're praying and you're like, okay, I'm doing this, God. I need your help. And then a mom showed up on my door that was taking their child, to Ascend. And it was just an answer like, that is where, and when we came and met and shadowed and our child was up in the school, we just knew that was where she needed to be. And it's been amazing to see. So this one child went from public right to Ascend, and just the transformation in her, because she was losing her light in the other situation. And at Ascend, she was getting that light back. And it was through her discovering her life mission. It was like, because we do it at home, but if they're in an environment where kids are telling them the opposite, it's super hard, And so it's just, Ascend has been a beautiful blessing, because we love homeschool. I love homeschooling the younger ones, because the one that went this year to Ascend was homeschooled, but she was ready to have more.
To have other adults telling her what to do.
And I get to do that. And she's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's not you're telling them what to do, you're guiding them. You're teaching them true principles and helping them discover how to apply that in their life. And that's what I love. So
I love that you mentioned that there became a light, because there's something magic that happens when you realize that you're bigger than just jumping through hoops.
Yes,
when there's
absolutely.
a greater purpose. We base Ascend loosely on the principles of the TJ Ed education,
which is so everybody knows, the Thomas Jefferson education.
Thank you. Written by Oliver DeMille. He's a master. He's an absolute pioneer. And he talks about a conveyor belt education or a leadership education. And that was eye-opening to me. It answered so many of the questions I had when I was going through my bachelor's degree. And it was like, you mean I'm meant for more than just to be able to find a job? Mm-hmm. And when you realize that, you're like, oh, I need to be preparing for important things, because God has a mission for me, and I have things that need to be accomplished that uses my strengths and my talents. And he created me the way I am, and the way that I think, the way that I do things, because I have important things to do. Once a student catches that vision, the fire is ignited, and and they start to realize that these teen years are really preparatory years,
Yeah.
and much more than just trying to figure out what they're going to do on Friday night or who they're going to hang with, even though those components are extremely important, especially in this season of life. I would never downplay that. But there's something absolutely full and rich when they realize they're here for something more than just
Absolutely.
Yeah.
just doing the basic things.
Well,
So-
their divine role, I look at,
Yeah.
like, and there are good things to all the educate, like public and all that, but missing out on the spiritual aspect is huge. Like the role of a child of God is so huge, that divine nature. And we tend to think like our role just as being an engineer or a public teacher, or all those roles are what we should focus on, but it's so much deeper than that. And when you learn that, the job or that comes along with it too, because you need to provide for your family, right? But it's so much deeper
Yeah.
than that.
Absolutely. Well, and those roles of your occupation or your wherever you choose to spend, use your talents is secondary to your heart.
Absolutely.
To know and to have the purity and the clarity of that connection from above is the first and foremost thing. After that happens, there's other things fall into place as it needs to.
Absolutely.
And you have clarity. You know, like you said, the divine nature in us.
Yeah. Well, and you're walking with God, who's going to guide you where you need to be. And that
Yeah, I
love
think
that,
that's,
Heather.
yeah. Well, and we had actually a couple of weeks ago, we had Peter Connect, who's with American Heritage Schools Worldwide. That's their online version. And he talked about that same thing, and that, they really emphasize what they call the 4 R's, right? And I'm not going to remember all of them, but, he mentioned that
Relate and reasoning and
relate, reason,
the other
research. No, that's not one. I can't remember. Listen to that episode to remember what that was, listeners.
We
But,
obviously need to read that.
but he said there's definitely parts of it, like especially that relate aspect, that is really difficult for a secular education to do, and that a place like American Heritage and Ascend can really provide that, because you're outside of that traditional system that can be quite contentious about what should and should not be in it. But when you start your own, it becomes a very
And to be fair, I think there are a lot of teachers that would love to
for sure
that.
it's just the nature, I think, of the public system.
Well, and the law, there is some laws that bound them as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Amen.
So adding that spiritual is so huge. So,
yeah. Anyway, so you started to touch on kind of what Ascend being based on Oliver DeMille's Thomas Jefferson education. You also talk a lot about a mission-driven life at Ascend and things like that. So what are some of the things that Ascend does to provide that mentorship and the philosophies that are behind why you do what you do?
Wow, great question. We do mentor. We try to train our mentors to become true mentors, which means that they're walking beside students and not necessarily out in front just dictating what needs to happen. You want to model the process of learning right beside your student. So many times when we're in classes, a teacher will go, wow, that was so profound. I've got to write that down. I've never thought of that. So there's that exchange of student and teacher and peers, all building upon the things that they're discussing and the things they're talking about. We hold mentor meetings with our students regularly between every 4 to 6 weeks. In the younger levels, we have the parent join in. And then when they become a little bit older, we realize that step into owning their own education is a critical part for them to meet with their mentor one-on-one. And they get to really talk about the process. Where are they at? How are they feeling about things? Are they structuring their time well? But to have that one-on-one time is as valuable for the mentor as it is for the student, because the mentor gets to know them and gets to know their interests. And then the better they know their students, the more they tailor what they teach in the classroom and the way they approach it. We do the simple formula that has been tested for centuries of just reading, writing, discussing. We do a lot of that at Ascend. We read, even in the younger levels, we read 5 to 7 books a semester. And so we spend a lot of time realizing to fill the well, you have to have good information to draw from to be able to have an effective discussion. And then when we come to school, naturally, our mentors will have certain themes that they want to talk about, like, A Christmas Carol, or 7 Habits of Effective Teens, or Failing Forward. Those are just some of the books that are done in our foundations class. They'll have certain themes they want to touch on, but they really allow a lot to evolve within the classroom with what the students bring. And the discussion becomes very rich. And the kids are like, wow, I read that book and you read this book, and you got very different things from it than I did. And they come together and they just raise the level of the understanding. And then the final step is writing about it. We don't do an astronomical amount of writing. We don't do as near as much writing as we do discussing, but we write because it helps our thoughts become exact.
Yeah.
And so we read to fill our minds. We discuss to be able to further that and deepen that knowledge, and also become ready to talk outside of the classroom. When you've had the practice inside the classroom, you become more articulate and you can share your ideas and stand for what you believe in a more powerful way when the environment is when it's needed outside of the classroom. And then when you get a chance to write about it, your thoughts just become very exact and it sticks with you. And that material becomes yours. And that process, done over the course of years, develops a heart and a mind like nothing that I've seen. It's so simple. They've used it for, like I said, for centuries, and different approaches, different ways, different combinations. But it's that reading, writing, discussing that is so powerful. That's the heart of what we do. Now, naturally, some topics don't lend themselves as easily to that. Math is one that we feel needs to be taught linear. I think step by step, day by day. I've just not seen anyone become confident or proficient in math without that discipline and without that accountability. And science is kind of right there in between. You definitely have to learn a vocabulary to understand science. But boy, there's a lot of opportunity for hands-on learning, and there's a ton of opportunity for discussion, but there is some absolute parts of science. So as we offer all the different topics that we do at Ascend, we have this nice variety of perhaps maybe a little more traditional type learning with the sciences and the maths. And then we have what we call our library studies, which involves English and which naturally is a lot of literature. And we have history and leadership all combined in quite a little combination. But those three weave together so beautifully that it's so much more rich. All three of them, just when you're reading a book in literature, and then you tie it into the concepts you're learning about in leadership, and then you tie that into a historical setting, it becomes so alive.
Yeah.
And just not these isolated little pockets of, oh, this is happening here, this is happening here. And once those connections start to happen in literature, it's a natural, normal part to be able to have it become part of you. We're going, oh, this concept isn't just work for Corey ten Boom in The Hiding Place. This concept works for me.
Yeah,
and that's the ultimate, is when we can change their very natures by the material that they're exposed to.
Absolutely. That relate and apply is huge too.
Yeah.
And one of the things I will say is, so Kate is our oldest, who started attending Ascend. And one of the things that we asked her last year, we were probably about this time, maybe a little bit sooner, maybe the, late fall or whatever, and asked her, like, okay, how's school? Do you like it? She's like, Dad, it's way more difficult than the public system was, but I love it. And that was what she said. And so I think that aspect of being able to, you do rely on their personal thoughts and trying to draw those out, and that keeps them so engaged with what they have going on, and it makes them care about, hey, I'm reading this thing because my mentor is going to ask for my personal thoughts on it, and not just some prepared thought of what he wants me to say, but he actually cares about what I personally learned. And that's one thing that I've loved about watching her bloom and grow at Ascend.
Well, and to add on to that, so she not only related it and applied it to her life, then she found the joy in it and wanted to teach us. So family
Yeah.
home evenings for her became teaching out of, they were doing mission driven mom,
Yes.
teaching
yes.
out of that, which was we loved it. So cute. She was so fired up about it, and at some points we were like, okay, but we got to keep the lesson to about this. We've got a
We have
5-year-old.
5 and 6-year-olds at home.
But don't you love it when they become so excited? And I think it comes back to that divine nature. We know divinely inside of us when we're doing something that's important. And we know when we're simply just going through emotions.
Yes, absolutely.
We know it. And when we can do that, when we're going, I can see the importance of this, all of a sudden it doesn't become a drudgery.
Yes,
Our student, you know what I mean? Our students are going, I'll do the necessary reading. And it is hard. There is nothing easy about this type of learning. And yet we all are designed to grow.
Yeah.
It's innate in us. And if we aren't growing, we're not satisfied. And I really feel like, oh boy, this might be getting, this is a Heather Paul, okay?
No, I love it. Go.
Like some of the concerns we're seeing in these latter days of the emotional struggles and some of the anxiety, sometimes I think that can go back to having us not engaged in meaningful things.
Yeah.
Because our souls know it.
Yeah.
Our souls know it. And yet when we can fill our souls, I think some of those things might be lessened. That certainly doesn't go across the board in any way. But I know that I'm much more happy when I'm engaged in something that I feel is important. And I think it's the same for our teens, our youth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you know the big picture, like when you say it's not as big of a deal. Like there's times when I get worked up about something and I'm like, but the big picture is this and that. So it's not really that big of a deal. But to add on to Heather, so the other day I had a situation happen and I was needing advice from someone. So I went out in the kitchen and I was like trying to well, let me ask John and talk with him. But I had that feeling of, no, Kate was out there, include her in this conversation. And so I told him, I didn't give names. I just told the situation, like, guys, I'm needing some counsel on this. And Kate was the one who picked it up and went to the cycle of creator and now mine's going to go blank on everything.
But yeah, so
there
there's the creator, the coach,
executor, and I forget what the other one is. And then there's the other triangle of being a creator and a coach. And she just gave me the advice I needed. And so it was so amazing. So this child is 14 and the wisdom she has because she is discovering her life mission and what she is helping her 42-year-old mom, and I guess I go back to even our gospel. We have a leader in our church who helped restore the church, Joseph Smith, who was 14. And I remember thinking, man, that's young. Like, how can someone who's 14 and then seeing that in my daughter, like, I think we underestimate what our youth and these kiddos can do and the wisdom they can gain if we let them discover it. And Ascend is hitting that on the nail.
Well, and you also mentioned the idea of, having meaning in our life. I mean, there's all kinds of books out there that talk about that. You're reading Corrie ten Boom's book, right? Of The Hiding Place, is that right?
The Hiding
Sorry,
Place.
I haven't read it, so I'm trying to remember.
We keep telling him he needs to read
I know.
That's your assignment, John. Because that's a life-changing book.
But I mean, you listen to that book and they got through their trials because they had meaning. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He got through his trial of the Holocaust because he had meaning in his life, right? I'm currently reading a book called The One Thing, and it talks about this desire to go and find what is your life mission that will give you meaning and support. And this idea of having a balanced life, he's like, is a something that doesn't exist, right? Like balance isn't there. What you have is actually counterbalance to create this idea of being of what looks like balance. And so, but having that meaning and purpose in your life is what can drive you to counterbalance your life so that it's working in all areas. And I think that's a really important thing that we don't always think about when we talk about education, is helping children and youth and teenagers to find meaning in their life, and doing it, whether it's through the mission-driven teen or mentoring through like a Thomas Jefferson education, I think is really, really important.
Well, and I'd like to add to that, learning is lifelong.
Yeah.
I think it's not just for our youth, the homes that are creating an environment of learning. It's a lifelong process, and what we learn when we're young, of course, lays foundations, but it continues. And if you can just have that deep love, there's nothing more satisfying. I have 2 daughters now who have graduated, and they're home from missions and married, and well, one that just left for mission, and to see them continue to want to learn at such a deep level means that we've done our job here.
Absolutely.
They're searching, they're looking, they're not always being satisfied with what's being offered. Traditionally, they're going, okay, this doesn't really fit me, but I'm going to spend the price or the energy to find what really does fit what I feel I really would like to do. And that's been a sweet thing to watch, and a payday. And I'm so grateful that you've shared what you have with Kate and what she's been able to do, because those are my paydays. I think, you wonder, as you're putting things together, is it really doing what we want it to do? And when you share that information, it's like, oh, yes.
That's what we want. Yes. And as a parent, I think every parent wants each child to know their divine, identity and what they can accomplish. So,
and I think being an environment that supports it and not just blasts them with everything anti of who they really are.
Absolutely.
In that, sometimes I describe Ascend as kind of an incubator. And I want to be able to incubate them through those really, really challenging years. So when they come out, they have such clarity and know who they are, that they can stand for truth no matter where they go. And yet, if you were to do that too early in a 12 or 13 situation where they're just blasted with all kinds of false information that they have to discern so early, they're not ready for it. And so I like that incubator idea that gives them the start and the launch that will allow them to be successful throughout the rest of their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that goes when I was debating what to do with homeschool and everything, because I always had that, you had people telling you, and you had that thought of, well, they got to learn how to deal with it, or things like, and then I actually had come to me that, no, they need to feel the Spirit as much as they can, so they are ready for that. They need that so much. Like, they're not meant to be out in the front lines on the war at the moment.
Yeah, they need to go through the training that we as adults have had before they're put into that front lines, because the front lines will come when they're ready to come. Like they're going to face them when they need to. Like,
well, honestly, each of us,
but we can prepare them.
Back up and we're constantly needing to build that spirit, and so it's not like we ever leave that. And going back to your just for youth, it's a lifelong learning. In a way, we're all quite young if you look at the big picture. We're eternal. I'm still a child.
Amen. And that brings me a lot of comfort, does it not?
Yes.
I'm still young in this whole process. When I look at the eternities, I'm still young.
I have a lot to learn. So and they're definitely souls. Like, I look at our Kate, I'm like, she's got a wise soul, more wise than me.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with my children as well. They have taught me more than I could probably ever teach them. And I think part of not having to go out into the war zone too early has given that opportunity to really blossom. If you look at what they do in the military, they don't ever send anyone on the front lines till they do boot camp.
Yep.
And this is boot camp. We are becoming warriors. And if we don't take that part serious to really prepare, then you're not prepared for when you do have to hit the front lines. And so I love that you said the front lines, because that brought that whole image to me, that you're right. That's what we're about. We are about preparing for war.
Yes.
And when they're there, they'll know how to do it.
And honestly, the parents are the ones on the front lines. That's our role right now. So,
and it's interesting. So I've been listening to a history podcast, but it's talking about the French Revolution. But one of the things that their army did, I'm not getting into the morality of the French Revolution and all the killing that they did there, but one of the things they did in their army that actually improved their army is they took veteran groups and they added the newcomers to those groups, so that every unit that they had. And this is how their army became amazing. And then, Napoleon came along and decided he wanted to conquer the world. But it's a way that they improved it. And I think it's a principle that we have here of, we're the veterans of the world as the parents, right? And so our job is to teach them along the way before they get to those main fighting situations where they may be on their own. They need that mentoring, like we've talked about. So,
well, and to add on to that, we have even older veterans, grandparents, and I don't know how many times.
And the world wants to discount them.
Yeah. And
their wisdom, but they have so much wisdom, and they, but they do try to like almost push them off to the side, be like, oh, you're old, you don't know anything, or that
culture of what
that book was written back in the Greek days, that can't have any meaning to me today, when you think about the Iliad or whatever.
Well, you could add the mentors are these books as well that they are reading. Absolutely. And then I love Ascend. I mean, yes, we're sending Kate to Ascend, but as a family, we're still involved. We're talking about what she's reading, and there's still that mentor relationship in the family as well. So,
and that's when it's by far most powerful is when parents choose to continue their education along with their kids, because boy, your dinner time conversations change an awful lot when you're all talking about the Christmas Carol. Like, let's talk about Scrooge. Let's talk about the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. I mean, that gives you incredible conversations around the table. And it always goes into what's happening here right now. You can direct those conversations and going, so what does it mean to, what does this mean? What does that mean to you? And education is really, I feel like, divinely meant to be a family process. And so at Ascend, we try so hard to keep the family the center. And we try to educate our parents somewhat. We're actually looking at wanting to provide more of that. And we always encourage them to read along with their kids, just like you're doing, and then having those meaningful discussions, because their number one mentors are their parents.
Yeah,
that's their number one mentors are their parents. And sometimes, as I've talked to people about homeschooling, some of them have said, this feels so good to me because I meant to do more than just laundry and meals for my kids. Absolutely. Where it expands that role and going, no, you are the number one mentor, whether you realize it or not, you are. And now let's teach you how to really magnify that. And that's a beautiful thing to watch within a home, because that's really where it all comes back to. We really do only want to be an extension of the home and have the values and the traditions honored of the home and the family time honored. We only meet 3 days a week, partly because of that. One is because they do have a considerable amount of reading, and they need time to get their reading done. Really, unless you have just a bionic focus, by the time you come home from school, you're not going to sit and read for 4 hours. You've got to do other things. You might get a couple hours in at the evening and still stay healthy, but those days at home really are meant to be able to do a lot of the reading. But in addition to that, it keeps them grounded at home with their family and the time with their parents to talk and discuss and just not have to navigate peers all the time. There's that letdown that they can just be safe within their mom's and dad's arms. And it creates a really, really nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we love that, Heather.
And one of the things that we love about Ascend that we've participated in is the idea of how you guys learn what they've learned. And you do that through oral exams, which we absolutely love. So can you talk about oral exams, what you guys do and what that looks like?
Oh, yes. It is actually our greatest payday for all the board members, those behind the scenes, and the teacher and the mentors as well. So we cancel school for a week. That's quite bold. We cancel school for a week, the last week of the semester, and we schedule students one-on-one to come in and stand before their mentor, their parents, and whoever else they might want to invite. Sometimes they bring in grandparents or a special neighbor, so we allow that to be very individual to the student, and then a board member. And for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, they are asked questions about what they learned in the semester. And this isn't meant to stump them in any way. It's truly meant to take what they have, be able to have them talk about the things that they've learned, and then be able to just ask them the next question. So the next concept comes up, the next concept is built. So they are growing live right before you. It is one of the most beautiful, beautiful experiences. We always say it's sacred ground in those rooms because heaven many times touches earth and witnesses to them. Perhaps one of their things that they need to do. I had a daughter that had an assignment that she had to research abortion to a really, really deep level and argue both sides. And through that process, she became such a champion for life. And that topic came up in her oral because her mentor is very aware of this journey she was on. And it was witnessed so strongly in that oral exam that she had work to do in this area of protecting life. And she became so passionate about it. And that final tip happened within her oral exam. It's just an incredible thing. It allows the mentor once again to get to know them to a deeper level. And again, tailor how they teach because they know them. But it's a tremendous amount of growth for the student. After they do that for several years, there's not many environments that intimidate them. My daughters, I go back to them because I know them. And I'm not telling a story that's not untrue because I don't remember the details. I remember the details of my own kids. But they go into any job. And now I have 3 that have done this. One that's still at Ascend. Actually, I have 2 more to send, but she hasn't had the experience yet. But they go into any job interview and they're like, "Oh, Mom, that's so easy." I've gone through oral exams. That's just so easy. It's super easy that way. And then my daughter, who's home from her mission while she was there, her mission president called her in about 3 months into her mission and asked her, I said, "Who are you? Why is it that you can handle any question that comes your way with any age, and you can answer with such eloquence and simplicity? And if you don't know it, you can simply say, 'I don't know,' and it doesn't faze you a bit. What has your training been?" And my daughter simply said, "Well, I've gone through 7 oral exams." And he was absolutely intrigued. And so once he came home from his mission, when he got home, he's invited us up to his home twice. And just to talk about the process that took place to develop the skills that my daughter Larissa had when she hit the mission field. And that was a huge payday. But more than that, ultimately, it's when you set an environment that allows witnessing from heaven to happen about who they really are. And coming back to that concept, the more we know about who we really are, the more we are able to live life in the way that he intended us to.
Yeah.
Oh, I like how you said that. Yeah, that's an awesome, I think, almost way for us to end our podcast with what you just said. Like, that is such an amazing statement. I just want to kind of let that hang, you know what I'm saying? Because that's really what education is about, is again helping them grow and develop into who God needs them to be. And that's going to be different for every child.
Yes.
But we all have missions from God that he needs us personally to do for him. And I think that's an amazing thing. So
Yeah. Heather, you're amazing.
Yeah.
So grateful that you've been brought into our lives and your family and the school Ascend.
And that you started the school, because it's been a blessing in our lives.
Thank you for following your mission and starting the school.
Sometimes I question that mission. This is hard stuff.
I think we all do.
Oh, we're so grateful for you.
Yeah. We like to end our podcast, Heather, with one of the questions: who is one of your heroes from history and why?
Oh, that is an excellent question. And naturally, depending on the experiences I've had recently, it changes. So one of my most recent experiences was I've determined that Casper ten Boom is one of my greatest heroes. If you've read The Hiding Place, which, John, that's your assignment now. You have to read The Hiding Place. If you've read The Hiding Place, he is the father of Corrie ten Boom. And his careful preparation prepared her to be able to do that incredible mission that she had through World War II. I mean, little did he know, as he was gathering them at his feet, teaching them the Word of God, and deliberately and carefully training their hearts and minds. Little did he know of what their mission was. that they would need to stand as such leaders and protectors during one of the most horrific times of history. Little did he know that he would train Corey to be able to bring peace and solace as they were in the concentration camps. And little did he know that Corey would go ahead and create a space of healing and refuge for those who had to go through those experiences, and then write one of the most profound and impactful books that has changed the world. Casper had no idea any of those things were going to happen to Corey, but he prepared her in every way for that life mission through the simpleness of teaching truth. And so he's one of my favorite men. And in all honesty, I can't wait to meet him when we're all gathered on the other side. He will be someone that I will seek out because he's been a fantastic example for me to try to follow.
Yeah.
So,
That's
I love awesome.
that. Amazing man. Yeah.
That is awesome. One of the stories that I haven't read the book, but I've heard lots of stories from the book. And one of the stories that Kelly shared with me is the idea of he was on the train, right? With
Corey asked
maybe
him a
you should tell
question.
the story because you
When Corey asked him a question that was obviously too old for her to really understand. And he sat with it for a while and he asked her to pick up his bag. Do you remember this, Heather?
oh, do I ever?
Yeah.
I've thought of it often. Continue.
Yeah, to pick up his bag and carry it. And it's a big bag and it's heavy. And she was just kind of like, what? And he said, well, obviously, and I'm probably going to butcher the way he worded it, but obviously you are too small to carry this bag, and basically applied it to the situation of let me carry the worries of this topic for right now. And when you're old enough
and you're ready
and
you're prepared and you're stronger, then you can
carry
begin to carry it. And I think that's the idea.
Yeah. And obviously later in the book, it applies to a situation in her life where she realizes it's her time to carry the bag, but I think going back to Ascend is these kids aren't ready, what we said, to be on the front lines or carry the bag. Right now, we are teaching them like Casper 10 Boom
we're preparing them to carry the bag of whatever it is that God needs them to carry.
Yeah. So
exactly. It comes back to that incubation period, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I've thought of that situation that Corey writes about so many times, and try to draw wisdom from it to know how to answer questions with my kids.
Absolutely.
What they're really ready for and what they're not.
Yeah.
And not to take the world's guidelines for that.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
To be able to know who they are, who my kids are when they're ready for certain information and certain responsibilities. And yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Heather, it's been so fun to sit and chat with you. I'm like, can we spend another hour or two?
Exact same way. You've taught me so much.
Oh,
and
appreciate it.
So appreciate your family and the friendship that we have. What a treat. Thank you for inviting me on.
We love you guys. So thank you.
And it is a mutual admiration society.
Yes, absolutely.
Heather, where can our listeners find you or connect with you?
Oh man, if any of these things have resonated with you, please go find us on the web at mentoring@ascend.org. And that's mentoring AT, not the sign, but mentoring AT ascend.org. And you can go in and fill out an inquiry form, and that will send a message to me, and I'll try to get back with you within the next couple of days, and we can chat and talk more about what we do.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's awesome.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you again for being on.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Diamond Education Podcast.
You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook
At Diamond Education, DIMOND, or on our website, diamonded.com.